Vladimir Putin has warned Russia would be prepared to use its nuclear arsenal to defend its territory as he dramatically escalates his war with Ukraine. Joining me now live is former US Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Firstly, what is your reaction to this escalation?
Well, thank you for having me. And first off, it's a combined thing. It is saying he'll use nuclear weapons to defend Russian territory, which of course no one is threatening Russian territory. But then he's also coupling it with these referenda in parts of Ukraine that he's recently taken to then make them claim to be annexed to Russia and therefore claim that that's Russian territory too. So he's trying to throw some ambiguity into whether he may or may not use nuclear weapons. But the reality is that he's doing this because he's in a very weak position. He has lost about a half of his conventional military capacity in Ukraine. He has lost a lot of the territory that he took earlier this year, both north of Kyiv and then around Kharkiv and now in the south. And so he's trying to raise the stakes here a little bit to see if he can maybe bargain to keep what he's already taken. Ukrainians, on the other hand, are pushing back quite effectively. With the weapons they've been provided, they're able to hit the Russian supply lines and diminish Russia's ability to keep their troops supported in the field. And Russia's going to have to continue to withdraw as the Ukrainians do this. So what we're seeing here are signs of desperation and weakness, I would say.
So how seriously then should this threat be taken, this talk of nuclear?
Well, I think any talk about use of nuclear weapons has to be taken very seriously. But that means we have to push back on it very, very firmly, as President Biden did, that there is no threat to Russia. There is no one who is seeking to attack Russia, take Russian territory, occupying part of Russia. What Putin is doing is he is bringing on defeat to Russia by his own actions, by his aggressive invasion of Ukraine. And that any use of nuclear weapons would be responded to very forcefully by the West. So it would be devastating for Russia should he actually do that. And I think that's understood by the military in Russia. I don't think that a nuclear use is actually likely, but we have to take any threat seriously.
You mentioned Joe Biden came out denouncing what's occurred overnight. How do you think that the US will now respond to this escalation?
Well, hopefully with great steadiness. Because this isn't really an escalation. What Putin's doing, he claims that he's going to call up reservists, 300,000 people, and add them to the military. It remains to be seen how well that goes. These are people who are no longer active duty, probably not fit, probably not well trained. He tried to increase the size of the military by 137,000 a couple of weeks ago by voluntary enrollment. That didn't work. And as I said, he's lost about half of his capacities, including equipment. So even if he calls these people up, what does he do with them? You can't just throw them into units and have them be effective, and you can't throw them into the war without giving them equipment. So he faces still a very daunting task. He's trying to play what few remaining cards he has with bravado, but he's really not holding a very strong hand.
Overall, where do you think this war is heading? It's now been going on since February with, at this stage, no sign of easing. What happens next?
Well, the Ukrainians, I think, are going to continue to push the Russians out of their territory. They have the will, they have the means, they have the determination to continue to push back. The Russians have poor personnel, poor equipment, poor leadership, poor command and control, low motivation, and they will not be able to sustain their forces in the field the way they are now. So I think this takes time, but it will move in Ukraine's favor as they push the Russians out. This spells trouble for Putin because he has staked everything on winning this war and eliminating Ukraine as a country and an identity and as a people. He called it denazification of Ukraine and demilitarization of Ukraine. That's not going to happen. He staked everything on success here, and it'll be a failure. This then will blow back onto politics and leadership in Russia. We don't know how it will go. And it is a very dangerous time, but it's a very dangerous time for Russia itself.
Yeah, and I suspect more interesting times ahead. Kurt Volker, thank you so much for joining us this morning.